Welcome, everyone, to an awesome conversation that we're going to be having about managing your regional footprint and data residency successfully. I'm your friend Kyle, as always, and I am also joined by a couple other friends where we're going to be talking about something that is seemingly becoming more and more important, especially as different compliance requirements come out. And I'm not going to spoil the rest. I'll let my friends go ahead and introduce themselves and tell us what we're going to be talking about for the next 20 minutes.
Sure, and I'll start. My name is Navas. I'm a cloud governance specialist based out of Chicago.
And I'm Krista Corbin. I'm the product lead for Control Tower, and I'm based in beautiful Boise, Idaho.
Awesome. I'm in northern Nevada, where it's been actually thunderstorming quite frequently and flooding. So that's been really fun. Now, Control Tower and governance and all these things, what does it all mean?
Sure. So governance actually means a variety of use cases can be applied there. And in this case, we're going to focus on a core and critical use case for new and existing customers. And that is setting yourself up with a solid cloud foundational environment. And by this, I mean that it's an environment that is secure and scalable. Scalable meaning you can provision your accounts and customize it. And then the security comes from applying controls as well as having visibility across your environment. And that's where AWS Control Tower comes into play.
Now, you used a magical word that I love hearing, which is scalable. As a security professional myself, when it comes to, how quickly a new account can be created for consumption for a particular use case or a workload, we want to make sure that we build in those different guardrails or the baselines that we would need to make sure that we're successful in our ability to achieve a well-rounded security posture, but also meet any requirements that we have. And how does Control Tower help us enable that?
So Control Tower, how I think of it, is really the easy button. It simplifies the AWS experiences by orchestrating about 14 different AWS services to set up that foundation that Nivas was talking about, right? That you can build off of. But if you already have that foundation built, where we set up best practices that are kind of tied to our well-architected framework as well. So Control Tower helps set up your basic logging accounts, your security accounts. It also helps integrate things like CloudTrail and SNS notifications, right? So that you can get started creating those net new accounts with those built-in controls and start building what your applications are or what additional services that you'd like to have. But we've already created that first, 40% of what you need in order to be successful within AWS.
And what kind of controls, can you give us like a high level of what kind of controls someone could expect to be kind of included when they're using Control Tower and
Sure.
they create an account with Control Tower?
Yeah. So with controls, like, first of all, our controls are meant to be rules, and they're supposed to help you meet the guidelines that are set forth by your organization. And with Control Tower's controls, we support 3 types of controls. One's are preventative controls, which are based on organizational service control policies. And so they will prevent actions or resources that do not match a certain policy setting. The second are detective controls based on config rules, which will evaluate your resources and if they're misconfigured. So let's say, for example, an EC2 instance that possibly has a public IP address that's attached to it. And then the third type of control that Control Tower supports today are our proactive controls, which will prevent developers from deploying a non-compliant template. So based on CloudFormation templates. And so pretty cool.
I like that. And that kind of falls in line with a lot of what's happening within the industry is, we're shifting security left to where, instead of having this workload that is currently running and has particular risks associated with it, let's stop a risky build from even being stood up and call it out and block it so it could be remediated before it's even put into production. And, you mentioned data and digital sovereignty. How do these different types of controls kind of help with that mission for our customers?
I think it's really important to think about, a specific objective, right? So it could be digital sovereignty or data residency, or it could be encryption at rest, or it could be improving resiliency. What Control Tower has done is actually set up a way to view all of the controls which could be applicable to that specific objective or that specific intent, to help really remove the complexity for customers so they don't have to go and try to define those specific controls or try to map them to specific frameworks. Control Tower is able to do that on their behalf, to really help accelerate them into building faster, right? So they can be more agile with the governance that they need. And data residency, as you mentioned at the beginning of our session here, is something that is becoming kind of ubiquitous in conversations, particularly in heavily regulated industries and in the EU or the public sector. And so what we've seen is an increase not only in customer interest into how to dive in and kind of demystify how to meet those regulatory requirements, but also a pledge, right, from AWS. Have you seen our digital sovereignty pledge come through?
I have, and actually, I believe we're going to be including a link to that in a chat that is located over here, or it might be over there. It might be somewhere, but we'll include a link to that digital sovereignty pledge. So for those that are watching us, you can go ahead and take a look at it yourself and see, what AWS is doing to help with that. So that is really neat. One thing that a security individual always, I like to say I'm optimistic, pessimistic more. But, it's kind of like, how do we prove that we are doing what we are saying, or that these controls are actually doing what they need to do? Is there a way to kind of like monitor the guardrails or prove that these controls are in place?
That's right. So if you take a look at our controls within Control Tower, you will notice that each of them have the ability to test out your controls. So you'll see a CloudFormation template that works with the control, and one that also contains non-compliant resources. So this way you can validate the control, verify that it's working as it is before applying it to your production environment. And that actually brings up an important point, Kyle. With the service control policies and proactive controls, we will want to be careful before applying it onto your production environment. Apply it to an organizational unit, like a test organizational unit, or apply it to your test and sandbox workloads before using it onto real production.
You'll notice I kind of started to chuckle because I myself am a very do it live kind of person. And I remember I was within my own environment, nothing consequential, applying a preventative control. And guess what? It worked because whatever I was trying to do stopped working. But what about other services that could help, like with the journey of, achieving, controls within the environment, or mapping the different processes?
Yeah. So Control Tower actually has an integration with Security Hub, and Security Hub has a number of detective-based controls that actually provide, compliance and findings so that you can remediate any sort of non-conforming policies. And actually, just late last year, Control Tower integrated with Security Hub. So a vast majority of our detective controls, I think about 160 today, are powered by Security Hub, so that you can go through and see your specific security score, and those controls are attached to a Control Tower specific standard that allows you to see your compliance footprint there as well. So
That's really cool.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways, even within AWS, kind of wider, outside of Control Tower and Security Hub, there are a number of different services like Audit Manager, right, which also help provide different reports that can be custom, that help with, showing, the two other bodies, right, that these controls are in place.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I always hear, when working with customers from the security side of things is, hey, we have someone that's asking a question of, what is
Mhm.
our security posture? How can we prove out our controls that are in place?
Mhm.
And it sounds like there's multiple ways that that can be achieved with services like Audit Manager.
That's right. That's right. And I've also heard examples where someone's been taking pictures and snapshots of the environments. Now it's much easier to just run Audit Manager and get the report.
Here's my AWS environment console.
You laugh, but it's true. That has
Oh no.
absolutely happened. Yeah.
I will say that the beautiful thing about using AWS is like it's one giant API. And so if you needed to do things that show like the different assets that you have and resources, and it's much easier to correlate that information now. But enough of me talking. I believe you had something that you wanted to show us in the form of a demo. And I'm a much visual, hands on kind of learner. And so, Krista, I believe you wanted to go through how
I
Control
do.
Tower does its thing.
I do, absolutely. But first, I'm going to show the digital sovereignty pledge at AWS that talks a little bit about AWS's, target really to help control the location of your data, which is what we'll talk about a little bit today, and how Control Tower can help with the set of fully AWS managed controls that are available, and also suggestions around how to encrypt to support encryption with KMS, which is also embedded within Control Tower. I'll show you how to do that. And then also suggestions for resiliency of the cloud, right? To make sure that you have, multiple AZs supported, even within a specific region, that all help support. And then also there's some really interesting information about a new sort of compute area that allows you to really restrict access to customer data, which is the Nitro system. So definitely worth going through if you want to know more about the digital sovereignty pledge overall and where AWS has already provided capabilities that support that. I'd check this out.
And again, the link will be over there, here, maybe up there. But yeah, we'll go ahead and link that so you can review it. And then also just real quick, for those that are not familiar with the region and availability zone like concepts, AWS, a region is a geographic location. So for example, we have a region in North Virginia where the availability zones, also known as AZs, are multiple locations within that region. So AZs make a region, and region is a giant geographical area. So just really quick plug.
Yeah, good refresher. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks.
So this is the Control Tower dashboard. We have a list of recommended actions here at the top, and it gives you a summary of your environment as well as the controls enabled, non-compliant resources, and then your organizational units. But where we'll focus today is within the controls category and then also within our region setting. So I'll show you how to adjust your regional settings, how to apply what is our by far our most popular data residency control. We call it the region deny control. And then how to also look and see how you can apply different types of controls for encryption at rest, encryption in transit, and additional data residency controls to limit like peer networking and things like that. So let's get
Let's have a
started.
look-see.
Yeah, these are the categories that I mentioned, where there's that encrypt data at rest control objective and the controls associated, encrypt data at transit, and then of course improving resiliency. But I want to really focus on the region-specific data residency controls. So I'm going to go to our controls panel here, and I'm going to just search region controls. You can see there are quite a few available, but what I'm actually going to focus on is this region deny control that I mentioned. This control is the only control that is actually applied at the landing zone level. So that it means it applies to every OU and every account within those OU of your control tower environment. So this is a service control policy, or an SCP. And you can see the different frameworks that it supports as well as the IDs here. And then you can see that this is actually an optional control, so you can choose to apply it or not. And the specific artifact here, this SCP, The regions that are applied are directly which you choose to govern and which you choose to deny. So a governed region within Control Tower are the ones where Control Tower allows you to operate and helps orchestrate those different services on your behalf.
See, that's huge, because especially if you're looking at also controlling where resources are deployed, not just data, but actual resources can land. You're able to control. These are our approved regions to use
Mhm.
for our production environment. So that's really cool.
That is,
Yeah.
yeah. And I was just going to add, like, this is a very powerful features that our customers really like to use, because some of our customers are not using all of the regions. And this way they can just focus on 2 or 3 of the regions, ensure that the resources are launched there, and have the confidence that other resources are not launched in other regions.
So it helps both from a data residency perspective, but also just from a good management perspective, right? By restricting those regions, make sure that you're not spinning up new resources and incurring costs when maybe you didn't intend to. So this is an
And
example.
shameless security plug. You also know where to focus your security controls too.
Also important. Yeah, I know. Great call, Kyle. So this is essentially a not action list. So there are specific services within AWS that are global, right, that need to be allowed. So some examples of that is AWS orgs or IAM, right? And so you'll see a specific not action list where these global services are allowed. We have vetted, right, that this does not transfer any customer data. So it still applies to those data residency targets. But let's try to apply this. So as I mentioned, this actually is in the landing zone setting page. So this will take us to our landing zone settings. You can see it's not enabled yet, and I have 8 governed regions, and this is my home region. One thing to note for this specific control, you cannot deny your home region. And what I'd like,
the home region is where you spun up the landing zone service, right?
that's correct.
Okay.
Yes. And so I'm actually going to modify these settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to both manage my regional settings. So today I have 8 regions governed, and Control Tower actually is in 22 commercial regions today. We launched 7 new regions just about a month ago. And so I have 8 governed today and that are active by default. You can see that we have specific regions that are not covered by Control Tower, but could also be active by default, and then a series of opt-in regions. This is new to AWS where they are not active by default. But I've decided that I don't want to be in Paris anymore, so I'm going to deselect that region, and then I'm also going to deny it through this region deny setting, right? So I'm going to enable this. Confirm that that's what I want to do.
Nice little warning saying you are about to turn things off.
And I think Navas mentioned this a bit before, but it's good to mention again, is that it's really important before you enable this control that you remove any specific resources or workloads that you have in the regions you're about to deny, right?
And there's things like EC2 Global View that help you with that, and other services. And even looking at billing and Cost Explorer can tell you what regions are accruing costs. So there's many ways to go about that, but that's a little out of scope for what we're talking about. But it's not difficult to do.
That's great. And then this actually requires a landing zone update. So I'm going to hit next. It goes through some additional customizations I could do to my landing zone, such as changing my cloud trail or my login configuration. I also, I think this KMS encryption would also support, data residency, as we talked about. So I'm not going to do it now, but that's one that I'd likely come back to enable later on.
Yeah, and if you do enable the KMS encryption, make sure that you update your KMS key policy, and then it will work. Yeah.
Great. And so you can go through and review all of your configurations. I'm applying this region deny control. I've adjusted my regions for governance, some additional configurations, which I didn't change yet. And then I'm actually going to update my landing zone. Updating your land zone does take a little bit of time as it goes through. So just be prepared to do that maybe in when you have a bit of downtime there. So as that kicks off, in summary, we covered how to view the different controls that are available, as well as modify your region settings, apply the region deny control, and then think about other characteristics like those different control objectives I mentioned: encryption at rest, encryption in transit, KMS key, etc. And actually, one other thing I'll just show you is that we've added a status and progress bar for updating your landing zone, so that you can see each of the key milestones of this update and where they are in the progress. So you have the percentage bar at the top, as well as the individual status and kind of tracker here to help you move along and understand where you're at with that update.
And if someone wanted to get hands-on with this without bringing it into their production environment, and wanted to kind of just understand how it operates, there's workshops that they're able to join, it sounds like, as well, which we'll include a link here in the chat. Again, don't know where the chat's going to be, but there's workshops that go hands-on with Control Tower if you're a hands-on learner or want to prove it out before impacting your production environment. And Krista and Nevis, this was awesome to see, and it's very insightful to see how easy it is to achieve these outcomes using something like Control Tower. I know previously when I was a customer, there was, I wish there was ways that we can at scale do these things. And that's when Landing Zone came into fruition. And now we have Control Tower, which is even more awesome. So thank you so much for your time. Our friends back at Reinforce 2023, it's already 2023, it's already June. We're going to be back to you shortly. Thank you so much for your time, and so long and farewell.
Thank
you.
All right, take care.